Chapter 685. The results were somewhat outside of Luonan's expectations. The lowest level of the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District was also a lake of magma in the stone forest. It was also a place where foreign energies were digested and smelted. The structure of this place was different from the other two Blood Soul Temples. There were tens of thousands of believers here at all times. They poured out negative, intense, and extreme emotions and distracting thoughts through telepathic channels. Ainli's mutation power had bypassed this stage in the beginning, but after circling around the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District, she still had to pass through the lake of magma in the end. Thus, Luonan obtained the opportunity to make close contact. The moment he got close, it was as if he was forcefully stuffed into a roaring mechanical factory or a surging waterfall. Hysterical screams and roars filled his ears, causing him to almost cover his ears. Luonan frowned and grinned. He switched through a few layers of his senses in order to filter out most of the negative information. And it was at this time that he faintly sensed that Lady Halder's consciousness was also within this lake of magma. As for the exact location, the surging flow of negative and extreme emotions was far too noisy. The smelting mutation power itself was like a smelting furnace, and it affected his senses to a certain extent. Luonan was unable to figure it out for a time. But as the precision of his detection increased, Luonan was certain that Lady Halder, the leader of the Blood Flame Order, had her consciousness residing within the depths of the lake of magma in the stone forest. She was at the lowest level of this chaotic and violent place. In a certain sense, this could be considered as taking the lead. After all, this place could be considered the foundation of the Blood Soul Temple. It wasn't just the Abyss District configuration that was like this. Everything else, be it the construction and polishing of sacrificial artifacts, or the reconstruction of the physical structure, all had to be started from here. Wasn't Luonan stuck at this stage as well? From his perspective, there really was a problem with the configuration of the Blood Soul Temple. In the physical structure, the temperature of the lake of magma wasn't high enough. In the Abyss District configuration, the problem was that the efficiency of smelting foreign energy wasn't high. Perhaps it was because of this that Lady Halder personally oversaw this place. Perhaps she was mobilizing and arranging the power of the Blood Soul Temple to smelt and purify the extreme negative emotions that wildly surged in? This was more in line with Luonan's conjecture of a smelting furnace. Luonan waited for further feedback. But after a period of time, he discovered that the unstoppable river of bloody light under the control of the Wraith Sign was somewhat impassable in the foundational grounds of the Blood Flame Order. It was hard to advance into the detection area. It's really different with someone around. Luonan soon discovered where the problem lay. The reason for this was that Madame Hard's presence had greatly increased the melting ability of the lava lake in the stone forest. To be more precise, the melting ability of the area around her had greatly increased. The strange power of the Blood Soul Temple that had seeped in had no problem moving in the other layers of the magma lake. However, once it got close to the core area, it would be affected by the interference, and even had the tendency of being smelted and mutated. If they got too close, they might be melted. If they resisted, they might be discovered. Thus, they could only draw a rough boundary and keep their distance. Luonan didn't interfere with the Wraith Sign's judgment. To hell with judgment. It was clearly evading by instinct. The good days of meat pies falling from the sky had passed. Now it was Luonan's turn to make a move. With these springboards that could reach into the Blood Soul Temple of the Abyss region, it was very convenient for Luonan's mental senses to permeate inside. His pure observation mode was simply born for this sort of situation. This was, without a doubt, an opportunity to observe Madame Hard up close. It was completely different from the external observation of the mental sensing network. It couldn't even be considered clairvoyance. It was a direct touch and analysis, as long as he got a bit closer, but the more he observed, the more puzzled Luonan became. Where are the rules and order? Luonan believed that he would be able to see a strict logic and an exquisite structure within the core of Madame Hard's will. Only like this could she support a furnace, smelting the external pressure layer by layer, turning it into energy that she could absorb. Then she could distribute and utilize it. However, Luonan didn't see these things. At least, he didn't see them at first glance. He only saw endless and boundless negative emotions. The area far away from Madame Hard was like this. The area near her was still like this. And Madame Hard herself was like this as well. The closer he got to where Madame Hard's will was, the more he could sense her state within the stone forest and the magma lake. She wasn't a comer, but a confronter. Her own mental and physiological plane was surging and surging, and it was clearly displayed. Desire for power? Desire for destruction? These inflated emotions and desires were like enormous roaring waves. They came and went, and they even charged back into the stone forest and magma lake. They stirred up a maelstrom of undercurrents that churned endlessly. Luonan also saw Luonan. His weight in Madame Hard's heart was quite heavy. He had the effect of the mountain of bones, the configuration of thoughts, and a series of other factors. He had fear, yearning, greed, and other emotions mixed together. There was also an indescribably enormous shadow within Madame Hard's heart. It seemed to be born from external stimuli. It was similar to Luonan Qi but on a much larger scale. Fear, despair, and other intense negative emotions were born from this. This caused Madame Hard to intentionally or unintentionally carry out some processing, causing her emotions to become hidden and dark. It was hard for Luonan to see any results no matter how much he observed her. But in any case, the Madame Hard in the stone forest and magma lake was far too different from the powerful woman that Luonan had observed and understood earlier. In this place she was more like a crazy woman. She screamed at the extreme emotions of thousands upon thousands of believers, competing to see who was more greedy, more fearful, and more despairing. Could it be that her external appearance was just the embers of the lava lake after she vented her emotions? That didn't make sense. Wasn't her brain lacking oxygen from all this racket? How could she have the energy to scheme? Luonan was puzzled no matter how much he thought about it. He clearly felt that something was wrong. He tried to probe deeper with his mental senses through pure observation. This wasn't easy. Madame Hard's emotions were like a complex maze. They surged and churned, twisting and changing. Wanting to capture the so-called core was an extremely difficult matter. It was very easy to be led astray. Luonan tried again and again, but he was always a bit off. He was able to comprehend a certain principle from this. The mental world of a person wasn't much different from the vast and boundless physical world of space and time. This was especially true for a person like Madame Hard. She was violent and complex, and she was deep and boundless. It was practically impossible to reach the bottom in one go. But this didn't make sense. When the Wraith sign was in control, he clearly felt that the temperature of a certain area was much higher than the surrounding area. How could it be now? Oh, he understood. Luonan slapped the railing and came to a sudden realization. He couldn't blame anyone but himself. His pure observation mode did indeed allow him to probe deeper without any pressure, but how could he understand the heat of emotions like this? Using pure rational observation to probe into the level of emotions and desires was obviously incompatible. In other words, he needed to be scorched by the raging flames of Madame Hard's emotions and desires in order to grasp the crux of the matter. This was easy. He could start from nothing and slowly adjust. He could fumble for a level of intensity that could be sensed but wouldn't stimulate Madame Hard. The Wraith sign couldn't do this sort of delicate work, but he could do it for him. Luonan's expression suddenly changed just as he was testing things out. He subconsciously pressed his chest, but there was a rumbling roar in his ears. It was as if the roars of thousands upon thousands of people were forcefully shoved into his mind. He had a similar experience before, but this time it was different. This was because Luonan felt heat. This was a ball of irritable fire that was forcefully stuffed into his heart. It instantly swallowed up a small portion of his rational region. It made him restless and anxious, but there was also a willful and joyful feeling of recklessness that came from disregarding everything. Luonan's mind was a bit absent-minded in an instant. He wanted to sever the connection with Madame Hard's emotions and desires, but he hesitated to make a move. Someone called out softly by his ear at this time. "Mr. Luo? Mr. Luo?" "Oh, Sister Yuan." Luonan suddenly woke up. He knew that he had been in a daze for far too long. He hurriedly suspended his probing and turned around. He made a slight movement, and he discovered that a layer of cold sweat had appeared on his back. It stuck to his underwear, and the cold wind from the balcony blew in. It was cold and drenched. Even low-level instincts of desire had this sort of impact. "Mr. Luo, are you all right?" I'm fine." Luonan was a bit embarrassed that his soul had flown to the heavens time and time again, and he had always been mysterious. The problem was that the matters he had paid attention to and pondered over were far too private. It was very hard to tell others, and it would cause even more trouble if he did. Fortunately, Yuan was the most considerate. She didn't make Luonan feel even more awkward. She just took out the results of her investigation of Li Yiwei's matter and asked Luonan to look over it. She gave a simple explanation. Through dissection and pathological analysis, the suspicious object within Li Yiwei's womb really doesn't belong to the category of a normal organism or tumor. The composition it contains should be quite complex. However, when it self-destructed, it first underwent a round of special poison contamination. Then it was placed under a high-temperature and high-pressure environment. Its original chemical structure was destroyed to the point of near extinction. It's very hard to find its nature and source. That's a chemical composition that only a mutant would produce. The so-called uterine leiomyoma is nothing more than a collector. Luonan directly revealed the answer. There was no need for him to hide this question any longer. He didn't say it before because his emotions were surging, and he wanted to send interference waves. He let it slip for a time. A collector? According to my observations, it should be something like this. Luonan was about to draw a simple diagram in the work area when he saw Mrs. Halder's sketch when he refreshed the page. He was stunned for a moment, and he resisted the urge to make changes with great difficulty. He flipped the page over. The shape of the parasitic mutant was roughly drawn in the newly created blank space. There was also a simple diagram of how it carried out its collection work within Li Yue's body. He had already simplified it as much as possible, but the diagram was still extremely complex. The chaotic lights from the balcony shone over. When the angle was changed slightly, it was simply like a demon painting was being created. Luonan was stunned when he shone under the lights. Chapter 686. Perhaps the virtual work area came with some animation effects. Under the illumination of the lights, the sketch of the parasitic mutant blended together with the fuzzy human frame. Its collecting tentacles replaced the positions of blood vessels and nerves, but they were unwilling to stay in their positions. They stretched out of the human frame and seemed to stretch out of the work area. They danced in the void. Luonan looked at his own work. He looked at those greedy and restless tentacles. He felt that there was something strange in his heart. It was like these tentacles were struggling and dancing. He was not unfamiliar with such a vague and bizarre feeling. It was just like when he used himself as an experiment earlier. Yes, he seemed to have taken drugs. Luonan had a bit of an idea as to why such a situation would occur. At this very moment, the irritable flames from the Blood Soul Temple of the Abyss District were still relentlessly invading him. The fuel of that flame was the extreme negative emotions of tens of thousands of people. He touched that environment and was affected by it. It was a bit like he was being assimilated. Fortunately, the situation was still under control. Luonan's thoughts were still very clear. His communication with Yuan wasn't affected. He pointed at the sketch and introduced the situation he knew. According to my observations, every time a third-stage mutant is added, it means that it can collect a bit more samples. It's hard to grasp how much is needed in order to satisfy it. After all, there are requirements for type and quantity. And the chemical composition produced by each infected person will overlap. Overlap. Yuan immediately grasped the key word. Luonan could only blink his eyes. If he told her about his arrangements 2,000 kilometers away, then he would be a bit too careless. Fortunately, Yuan never forced him to do anything. She turned her gaze to the chaotic dance of demons on the rooftop outside. There are 22 over here. That's 22 seeds. Yeah. It should be very easy for them to blossom and bear fruit after being stimulated. Luonan responded without thinking. He discovered that Yuan's words didn't sound like an analysis, but more like an emotional sigh. That was right. Yuan had never faced the 22 small shrimps at the grand banquet. She faced the tens of thousands of potential infected people that were impossible to control with normal thinking. This number was far too excessive for anyone who maintained order. Luonan could feel the pressure Yuan's heart at this moment. But then again, how did this become her responsibility? The military, the government? All those people were still in the dark. Luonan suddenly understood. Yuan had concealed the information of 10,000 potential infected people. In the end, she had shouldered a great deal of responsibility. But if that wasn't the case, how could the people from Quantum Corporation so easily jump out? Now that the situation was clear, why should he continue to bear the burden? Thinking to this point, Luonan blurted out, "Sister Yuan, we can talk about this matter now." Yuan was startled, but with her intelligence she quickly understood what was going on. She laughed involuntarily. "I know, but we can still suppress it for now. Tens of thousands of people will crush some swingers." "I already said he's a swingman?" Luonan mumbled to himself. But he was really just saying it. After all, he was a standard dreg on the political level. There's no need to think too much about it. Everyone specializes in different fields, so their methods are different as well. Just leave these matters to us. Mr. Luo, you just have to inform us of the changes in time. This matter belongs to you. I'm afraid that the following period of time will be very tiring. We have to be prepared. Don't worry, Sister Yuan. Yuan smiled faintly. She let out a light breath as the cool air blew over. The night wind ruffled her hair and made her squint her eyes. She looked like she was enjoying it very much. This was probably the most standard example of taking a break from the busy. Luonan knew that Yuan was certainly working around the clock during the middle of the night. There were endless matters waiting for her. Putting himself in Yuan's shoes, he felt a chill run down his spine. If he were to stand in Yuan's position, he would most likely go crazy. Perhaps it would be admiration, sympathy, or even pity. Luonan suddenly wanted to help Yuan ease a bit. Let's not talk about the specifics of the solution. Right now it was good to be able to chat and relax. Yep, there was also him. He had been scorched by the intrusive raging flames. His mind was quite vexed. He didn't want to ponder over matters anymore. He just wanted to rest for a bit. Luonan waved his hand to extinguish the work area with this thought in mind. He leaned sideways against the balcony railing and adopted the posture of having a chat. But his emotions surged forth and he was a bit dumbfounded. What should he talk about? The wristband on his wrist vibrated at this time. First, the watch with the garbled code lit up. It projected light under the control of a predetermined program, forming a three-dimensional region of all sorts of intertwined garbled codes in the space of an inch around his wrist. Then the garbled codes began to form an orderly puzzle. A portion of it formed a simple human silhouette, and the surrounding area was this person's name? It was a character that he had no impression of at all. The garbled codes rearranged themselves during this baffling time to form a complete leaderboard. The first person at the top was the fellow who had just been revealed by the garbled codes. Next to his name was an item called Number of Missions Completed. She stood shoulder to shoulder with Luonan. She squinted her eyes as she welcomed the cool breeze. So you want to talk, huh? What do you want to talk about? Are you trying to coax me? In the end, it was rare for Luonan to see Yuan in such a lively manner, so he decided to forgive her. Luonan hadn't truly thought of a good topic up until now. His meager life experience and taste were simply incapable of supporting a pure leisure style of chatting. In stark contrast to him, the group of people on the rooftop were playing to their heart's content. These people could play, knew how to play, and dared to play. Even the old-fashioned kiss cam was full of tricks. When a strong light beam shone on a designated group of people, it was hard to say what sort of eye-piercing scene would appear. Luonan's eyelids twitched as he watched. He slipped out a sentence, "Let's talk. Let's talk about these people. It's like I said just now. They're really having a good time." His gaze wandered across the rooftop. Actually, he didn't need his eyes. He could sense the wanton and unrestrained emotions and desires of this group of people purely through his senses. This even included the passive participants such as the models. Under the turbid flow of alcohol and drugs, all of their thoughts and burdens were drowned out. At the very least, he couldn't see any traces of them for the time being. Is this considered being carefree and without worries? Living a befuddled life is more appropriate. That's right. Luonan subconsciously sighed. Mr. Luo is envious. Ha! Yuan turned around to look at him. I feel that Mr. Luo doesn't care about the enjoyment and treatment of these people. You only care about their relaxed and free state. Why can they live a befuddled life, while we have to face the cold wind and discuss these urgent and boring matters of life and death? Could it be that this isn't envy? No, I'm not envious. Luonan stared blankly for a few seconds before denying Yuan's judgment. He unconsciously moved his fingers. It seemed that he wanted to draw a diagram in the void to guide his thoughts. But in the end nothing took shape. So he could only say whatever came to his mind. I can only say that I'm curious. You know that I took drugs to alter my nervous system. Right now I'm not sensitive to alcohol, drugs, and so on. So I don't really understand this state. Can the pressure and burdens of a person's heart really be forgotten through this sort of method? Yep. Actually, I know the theory behind it. But emotions and desires really aren't things that can be controlled by rational thought. They have to be burned for a bit. Crap. I'm talking too messily. I understand. Yuan also went to look at the scene of demons dancing chaotically on the rooftop. Her tone was completely different from Luonan's. Mr. Luo, it's true that your words are incoherent, but your emotions are very clear. Sometimes, a simple transmission of emotions is enough for a human interaction. Luonan blinked. What emotions? Yuan no longer spoke. She just maintained her smile. This time it was Luonan's turn to understand. He laughed bitterly. Or is it envy? No, that's not right. Then he used an even more frank and harsh attitude to define himself. It's not envy. It's envy. Chapter 687. It was unknown which idiot had done it. Cam's tricks had actually been played with Luo Nan and He Yuan. When the lights focused on one's body, one would suddenly become the center of the world. The physiological and psychological states of people would inevitably undergo a certain degree of change. This involved instincts that had been passed down for millions of years. The only difference between people was whether they were more or less used to it. What's more, there were countless people clamoring. They screamed towards the balcony, kiss, 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 rip, rip. From the perspective of the group of people on the rooftop, He Yuan was undoubtedly a first-rate beauty. Luo Nan could be considered a fresh and tender youth. His beauty was naturally delicious. People were impatient to watch a restricted-level drama. It would be best if they could personally participate. However, the reactions of the two people on the balcony were rather cold. Luo Nan knew that he was a bit nervous and excited right now. His heartbeat had increased a bit, but this was far from enough to shake his mind. He had no intention to ponder over the complex physiological and psychological mechanisms within. He just followed his simple emotions. His fingers faced the strong light and streaked across the rooftop. 99% of the people here are older than me. Sister Yuan, you're actually quite young. You're at least 50% younger than the people here. Why can they be like this but we have to be like this? Why can they use this method to be happy but I can't experience it at all? Yes, I can't experience it. In comparison, Mrs. Halder seemed to be a bit more pleasing to the eye. At the very least, she did things with great difficulty. She bore pressure that was unimaginable to outsiders. Luo Nan could understand this method, but he couldn't understand the group of people below him. He tried to place himself in their shoes, but he couldn't find any pleasure. He just felt a bit of envy and jealousy towards that state. He Yuan's voice didn't change at all under the strong light. On one hand, it's because we can see a level that others are unable to imagine. We can also see the danger that is clearly far away, but it seems to be coming in the blink of an eye. Actually, Mr. Luo, you can relax and even indulge at any time. It's very rare to see an ascetic monk like you in the community of ability users. Vision and enjoyment are never contradictory. If you can solve problems by saving minutes and seconds, then a crisis wouldn't be called a crisis. Cough. A crisis or something. On the other hand, perhaps it's guilt. I feel that I have made mistakes, that I can do better, and that the gap between reality and theory is unforgivable. I want to fill in the gaps and flaws, and then torture myself over and over again. Luo Nan felt that the atmosphere was a bit strange. Right now it seemed that He Yuan was no longer consoling him, but some other element was mixed in. He turned his head to look. Under the strong light, He Yuan's side profile was fair and pure to the point of being practically flawless. Her calm and reserved bearing was extremely in line with Luo Nan's aesthetics. This should have been a very pleasing scene, but in the end, he couldn't ignore the tossing and turning clamoring of those people on the rooftop. Many people felt disappointed because of Luo Nan and He Yuan's serious lack of cooperation. For the sake of stirring up the atmosphere, their mouths became more and more unrestrained. Luo Nan could only sigh in regards to this. It's fine if I torture myself, but now this group of people has come. Sister Yuan, right now I feel that letting this group of people play merrily makes my heart feel really bad. So Luo Nan let the few sparks that were leaping in his heart collide with the ointment that continued to accumulate and mutate in the depths of his body and mind. In the blink of an eye, the ointment exploded into flames, burning both inside and out. I've really had enough. Luo Nan muttered to himself. He cast his gaze towards the rooftop once more. Before his eyes was the glaring light and the malevolent and warped faces. His ears were filled with clamorous noise, and his mental sensing network gathered muddy emotions and desires. The three most important sensing channels merged into one, creating a grotesque and dazzling space together. This preposterous space was trying to swallow him up, to make him dance according to the terrible rules within, to smear the terrible ointment onto his body. Dream on. So Luo Nan faced the light and faced the several hundred gazes that were focused on him. He raised his hand and crossed his arm, making a classic umbrella gesture. He didn't conceal his emotions in the slightest. It was the equivalent of a blazing torch that was thrown directly into the boiling pot of oil of desire on the rooftop. Boom. The obscenities and vulgarities piled up and expanded far too much in a short amount of time, to the point that the details were completely lost. All that was left were clamorous howls. If Luo Nan wanted to, of course he could distinguish every single detail. But what was the point? His telepathic thoughts radiated out, triggering interference waves in passing. A second later, the powerful lights operating smoothly under the lighting control system suddenly went out of control. They were like incorporeal sharp swords. They hacked and chopped randomly on the rooftop, sweeping through warped faces one after another. Occasionally they would pass through some dirty corners, drawing even more curses from people. "You're crazy, lighting engineer. Bullshit. What the hell is this? *CK. Hurry up and extinguish the lights." "Okay, extinguish them." Luo Nan complied with their request, extinguishing the chaotic lights. Everything. Luo Nan snapped his fingers, and the rooftop that was surrounded by lights suddenly sank into darkness. At this time, even the wristbands and other electronic products that everyone wore could forget about lighting up. Of course, it wasn't to the extent of being completely dark and lightless. The light pollution of the city could more or less help, but the intense change in light and dark environment had already exceeded the upper limits of many people's minds. Some women were screaming and there were vague curses mixed within. There was also the rather awkward sound of someone falling into the water. The entire rooftop was a chaotic mess, and the corresponding emotions were converging towards the same direction. People would naturally form uneasy interpretations of things they couldn't understand. Perhaps they wouldn't be able to use their brains in a rush, but the darkness would help them think, or let their imaginations run wild. "Mr. Luo. Sister Yuan?" "Yeah, it's nothing." In the end, Yuan didn't continue speaking. Luo Nan took it as her acknowledgement. So Luo Nan leaned on the railing with his elbow. He watched everything with interest and a clear conscience. He savored the novel feeling in his heart. Luo Nan had never experienced this sort of situation before. He didn't have a clear goal. He didn't have a definite direction. Perhaps this was just a prank? Speaking of which, what was a prank again? He habitually took this opportunity to reflect a bit. If he analyzed it according to Mrs. Halder's and Ian Lee's masks, then what kind of mask was he using right now? A mask of weakness? A mask of strength? Plausible but not. A mask of rationality? Come on, where was rationality right now? Luo Nan felt a bit dizzy. This vaguely overlapped with his memories of his early days of secretly drinking with Mo Peng. But when he carefully examined the roots, it was a very new thing. It was like an ignorant and restless existence was born from a corner of his heart. It sprouted and collided with the chaotic reactions of the surroundings, mutually intertwining and absorbing nutrients. Gradually, it became a few basic reactions taking shape and strengthening. Luo Nan wasn't clear on the specifics and he didn't want to think too much about it. He felt that this was quite good. It was quite relaxing. He didn't need to think too deeply. He just needed to follow the itch. Yes, it was like scratching an itch. He just needed to find a comfortable strength and use his strength. It was also at this moment that the Wraith Sign, who was leading the invasion of the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District, seemed to sense the situation over here. It gave Luo Nan a sidelong glance. Luo Nan had never understood this demon. He didn't understand this fellow's reactions at all. He didn't understand where this fellow's actions came from. But right now, with this sudden sidelong glance, Luo Nan was shown upon by the demonic pupils of a different color. He suddenly understood. At least he understood a bit. This chaotic fellow seemed to be very excited. It was precisely this state that was transmitted over to Luo Nan. Luo Nan was able to grasp the information contained within. The Wraith Sign didn't possess intelligence, but it possessed a gluttonous instinct. It could be called aesthetic appreciation. From its perspective, the emotions and desires of living creatures were ingredients. Ingredients were divided into quality and coarse. Cooking techniques were also divided into high and low levels. In its eyes, its master, Luo Nan, was perhaps a savage who only knew how to hunt and gather. Even if he did occasionally plant crops, he did so freely. His harvests were all unprocessed. They were carelessly eaten and they tasted terrible. Though the quality of the ingredients didn't improve, a certain someone finally had some self-awareness. So hungry. Foodie. Luo Nan experienced the emotional state of the Wraith Sign. He felt that it was even more interesting in his mind. There was also inspiration. He clearly received inspiration. He patted the railing and decided to experiment with this new method. Luo Nan faced the darkness of the rooftop, as well as the restless emotions that frantically spread and grew within the darkness. Luo Nan let out a breath, but at the same time he made everyone on the rooftop temporarily stop breathing. Hush. Quiet down. Listen to me. Luo Nan didn't deliberately raise his voice. How could he make several hundred people listen to him? Well, it was actually quite simple. His soul strength interfered with the plane of reality and sealed everyone's nose and mouth. At the same time, his interference strength was enough to guarantee that everyone could hear his words. He was practically speaking into the ears of everyone on the rooftop. The rooftop instantly quieted down quite a bit. There were no other sounds, but there were even more intense sounds of struggle. The clanging sounds of tables and chairs being overturned lingered in the ears. And these noises quickly subsided. All that was left was Luonan's voice and will flowing within the darkness. Frankly speaking, you've provoked me. You've made me very unhappy. Of course, being happy isn't something I'm good at. I understand the opposite. Then, as a greeting and also as a form of revenge, I can convey to you the things I'm good at. From now on, I want you to shut your mouths and not breathe. I want you to howl in pain. I want you to beg for forgiveness from fear. Oh, if you think of this darkness in the future, I'll allow you to think of me. My name is Luonan. I'm a fellow who doesn't really know how to joke around. Yuan looked over in a daze from the side. In the back, Xianxia and Gouda also looked through the glass door. They maintained their stupefied posture. Even further away, there were different people using different methods to watch this preposterous live broadcast. Chapter 688. In the corridor of a certain floor of Aurora Cloud City, it was already around 3 in the morning. The banquet that should have been in full swing had been forcefully interrupted, and this place appeared empty and cold. Occasionally, a few waiters could be seen, but all of them were listless, as if they were still mourning over the tips that had flown away. Even a dazzling beauty like Zhang Yingying who passed by could not raise her interest. Zhang Yingying didn't have any opinion on passers-by. She just did her job of leading the way. Mr. Bai, this way please. Io, don't be so polite. Seeing you like this makes my heart tremble. The middle-aged Mr. White's eyes narrowed as he smiled. He walked with his hands behind his back, looking as humorous as ever. He asked casually, how's the situation over there? As for Fei Jin, she's probably still unconscious. She's just a temporary vessel for her soul, so she should be easier to deal with than Li Yiwei. I'm talking about Luonan. How is he? I heard that his temperament changed drastically and he threw a tantrum? I've had enough fun, so I'm sleeping. Sigh, Mr. Bai, why don't you treat that kid while you're at it? His condition tonight is really abnormal. Mr. Bai's eyes twitched. What kind of stupid idea is this little girl coming up with? Although I'm old and unfilial, I'm still living a good life. I haven't lived long enough these days. Luonan and the others were in the room up ahead. Bamboo Pole was leaning against the wall outside, smoking. He saw Mr. Bai and Zhang Yingying, and he waved his hand from afar as a greeting. Zhang Yingying ignored him and only looked at Mr. Bai. Do you want your life just to see a doctor? Where are the medical ethics? Mr. Bai said confidently, don't talk about morality. Let's look at the feasibility first. My dream invasion technique, to put it bluntly, is to steal some materials from the human mind and build a seemingly right but actually wrong little maze or something, confusing people and making them think that it is their own work. Then they will take the initiative to follow the maze and replace the beam with a pillar. The problem is, some people's materials are straw, which is light and easy to use. But others' materials are large rocks, which are hard to move and can cause a sprain on their back. If they are not careful, they might even lose their lives. Tell me, Luonan, Boss Luo and Professor Luo, are they using thatch or boulders? What kind of nonsense is this? That's right, that's the principle. While they were arguing, Bamboo Pole had already put out his cigarette with a smile. He pushed open the door for them and gestured for them to enter. Zhang Yingying took the lead. She had already taken a few steps into the room when she realized that something was wrong. She turned around and saw Mr. Bai standing outside the door. He was looking left and right, his face full of expressions. Hey, what's wrong now? Mr. White coughed twice. Let's negotiate. We can examine the carrier, but can we move it out first? Inside the room, the two bodyguards, Xianxia and Gouda, stood in a corner. Yuan was operating the virtual work area, giving orders to everyone. Hearing the noise, they all raised their heads. At that moment, Mr. Bai's face turned serious. He poked his head into the room again, and his wrinkles appeared on his old face. It's like this. Don't you feel bored? Really? Zhang Yingying blinked. Yuan subconsciously shifted her gaze. Luonan's body was curled up on the sofa across from her. He was sleeping soundly, facing the backrest. He was completely unresponsive to the sounds of the outside world. At this time, Mr. Bai waved at her. Come out and talk. And you guys. He called out the few people in the room who were awake. At the same time, he called out to the psychic wave network maintenance team of Shangding Building. Help me pull up the interference field diagram of the area. A few seconds later, The relevant results were sent back and shared with Mr. Bai in the mission channel. Right now the room has been turned into a pot of porridge by someone's soul strength. You guys don't even notice a thing? It was as if the dynamic image of the disordered magnetic field lines was fine, but He Yuan's eyes focused on several key data. Her brows unconsciously locked together. Bamboo Pole clapped his hands and said in hindsight, "No wonder my smoking addiction flared up. So it was because I wasn't feeling well in the room. My subconscious wanted to come out and take a breather." Zhang Yingying curled her lips at him. Mr. Bai actually nodded in agreement. "It's very possible. Vice President He and Ikuan, who have been with that person for a long time, have received an even more intense and direct impact. They are no longer sensitive to the subsequent effects." He Yuan's gaze pointed straight ahead. "Mr. Luo, what's the situation right now? Do you have a clear judgment?" "He's dreaming." When it came to the field he was most proficient in, Mr. Bai replied straightforwardly, "His cerebral cortex should be extremely active. The information stored in his brain region is continuously being excavated and reorganized. Moreover, it is constantly producing new things. Since his soul strength is too powerful, there is a corresponding power radiating out, but he unconsciously controls it. It's fine if he doesn't control it because the power will naturally scatter. It's precisely because he subconsciously controls it that it forms a meaningful building. Yes, it's popular to call it format right now. You guys have been inside for a long time, and you're also in a clear-headed state so you're completely unaware. However, if your mind isn't clear and you're in a daze, it's very likely that you'll be pulled into a dream. He has that ability." Zhang Yingying's teeth hurt from listening to this. He only fell asleep after injecting drugs. Then he assumed a strange posture in his half-asleep, half-awake state. It was very frightening. He Yuan wasn't there at the time, but Qin Ikuan and Gauda were there. They nodded their heads in confirmation. Mr. Bai furrowed his brows as he listened. He thought for a bit and walked into the room quietly. He approached Luonan and probed Luonan's breathing and other vital signs. The others followed him in when they saw him enter the room. "How is it?" "His breathing isn't stable enough. His body's surface temperature is high. His muscle tone is abnormal. It really is a bit of RBD. Oh, it's the characteristics of REM sleep behavior disorder. But a more direct conclusion should be that his skeleton is under a certain amount of pressure. After all, the soul strength in the dream isn't easy to control. Mr. Luo himself doesn't seem to have completely resolved the problem of balance between his body and soul structure. We can't rule out the possibility of losing control and pressurization. Then we need to wake him up as soon as possible? The problem right now is that with his perceptual abilities and his current interference with the surrounding area, he actually hasn't sensed us at all when we surround him and talk." Mr. Bai shook his head with a bitter smile. He could only use the cautiousness of a doctor to make a suggestion. "We need to wake him up. But we need to consider the possibility of losing control of his soul strength when the dream collapses. I can try to guide him, but from the current situation his body's reaction is quite intense. His biological instincts are currently in an active state. The RBD of an ability user really isn't something to be trifled with. We also need to be careful not to let him injure himself." The group of people looked at each other in dismay. They didn't understand much of Mr. Bai's words, but they all understood the meaning of, "I'm not sure." At this time, everyone had already completely forgotten about Fei Jin, who was in the bedroom. Who would have thought that the main character wouldn't even get a turn during a routine inspection? Instead, an even more important character would have a problem. He Yuan pondered for a long time before finally speaking. "Mr. Bai, the problem right now is largely due to the imbalance between the body and soul structure, right?" "Yes. To be precise, it's the control method that maintains the balance between the body and soul structure. There's a possibility of losing control in the dream. What we need to do right now is to eliminate this possibility." "Okay. I'll make a call." Yuan spoke and then walked to the side. She was in the corner of the room talking to the person on the other end. After the call was connected, she gave a very direct introduction to Luonan's situation. Then she began to listen, only occasionally saying a few words. Chapter 689. Okay. This was Mr. Bai's job. No matter how special the situation was or how difficult it was, he wouldn't shirk from it. He Yuan immediately shared the call with Mr. Bai, allowing the other side to communicate directly with Mr. Bai. This was to avoid any miscommunication. Mr. Bai listened very seriously. At the same time, he made a judgment to see if the plan on the other side would really work. As a doctor, he would speak without hesitation if he had any doubts. He would then consider the matter further. However, things went surprisingly smoothly. The man on the other side had a hoarse and deep voice that sounded intermittent, as if he was seriously ill. But the plan he spoke of was rooted in the foundation of an already confirmed domain. The logic was tight and the veins were connected. What was even rarer was that he had a very deep understanding of Luonan's body and soul. He spoke of some details, and Mr. Bai, who was present, immediately made comparisons. He had a sudden realization. After a few discussions, the wrinkles in the corners of Mr. Bai's eyes loosened. In the end, he simply took off his jacket as he spoke. He loosened his sleeves and began to adjust his breathing. He was going to act according to the plan designed by the other side. How should I address you? Xiao. I know. So it's Gym Master Xiao. Mr. Bai secretly praised, a great teacher produces a great student. It was no wonder that Luonan had said a few good words for him, the martial arts teacher, during his public lecture. Luonan was indeed worthy of it. The pleasantries stopped at a certain point. Everyone knew what was important and what was urgent. Mr. Bai immediately gestured to Hiyuan to let go of the bracelet she wore for the time being. Hiyuan didn't say much. She did as she was told. Mr. Bai took the bracelet and placed it next to Luonan's ear, fixing it in place. He used the shared communication device to communicate with the person in the distance. They adjusted the pace together. There was no need for him to say anything. The others in the room consciously backed away. They all held their breaths, afraid of disturbing Mr. Bai and Gym Master Xiao's joint treatment. Xianxia was careful. She pulled God and the two of them guarded the door. Xianxia deliberately went to the bedroom to watch the unconscious Fei Jin and put an end to any possible mishaps. Mr. Bai slowly exhaled. The sound seemed to echo in the silent room. After adjusting his breathing, he softly said, "Hall Master Xiao, let's begin." The change did not happen immediately. It was only when Mr. White's voice faded away and the air became still again that a slight vibration appeared. It had a weak effect on the air. Everyone present was an ability user. Their senses were sharp, and they could all hear a wave of low and deep sound coming from the earring. From the sound of it, there seemed to be ups and downs, a rhythm and a turning point. It felt like there was a clear meaning to it. However, if one tried to identify it carefully, they would not be able to understand the details at all. It was like the chanting of Buddhist scriptures in the temple, which had been reconstructed and recombined in its unique rhythm. Zhang Yingying's eyelids twitched. For some reason she had some impression of this sound wave, but she couldn't find the source. No matter what, this was not a good time to ask questions. She could only endure and suppress the anxiety of not being able to help at all. She stared at how Mr. Bai was going to deal with this. Mr. Bai's eyes slightly widened. They seemed to be closed yet not closed. His body swayed. He was like an old man in the middle of the night who could fall asleep at any time. And this was the sign of the activation of the dream entrance technique, which he relied on to become famous. His entire body was in a nearly relaxed state, and his soul strength permeated into the surrounding dreamland magnetic field, using it as a medium for the sound wave to vibrate and transmit. What he needed to do next was to ensure that this sound wave maintained its original nature as much as possible during the process of transmission and reception. He wanted to preserve the original message. And because of this, Mr. Bai was able to understand the basic message transmitted by this sound wave from Xiao Xinyu earlier. It was a set of sentences. My heart is like a prison, my heart is like a furnace, my heart is like a mirror, my heart is like a country. It was as if Luonan was wandering through a long and chaotic gallery. Front, back, left, right, and even above his head and below his feet were piled up with paintings of thick ink and heavy colors. Even if they were paintings, Luonan wouldn't be able to find a clear concept to correspond with. The color structure of these paintings clearly destroyed ordinary aesthetic perception. Some were abstract, some were filled with metaphors, and some were the direct expression of emotions. Luonan could only understand them this way. In fact, he didn't understand anything at all. He only saw the chaotic structure and colors piled up layer by layer, filling his field of vision. He couldn't sort out a basic logic, but he was also unable to reject the corresponding perception. He could only allow the lowest level of intuition to passively accept all of this. He didn't care whether or not it would cause a misunderstanding. He just wanted to swallow it whole. The problem was that this gallery was really too big, and it didn't give him any sense of direction. There was only an endless pile of paintings. In the end, it was as if someone was forcefully pulling open his eyelids and pouring those dazzling colors into his eyes. At the same time, there was a physical stimulation that seemed to melt into his blood vessels at any time. Every color brought warmth, smell, and taste. and every stimulation required him to make an instinctive and emotional response. These stimuli didn't have any logical connection to speak of. Perhaps the same color, the same structure, but when stuffed in at different times, it would give him a completely different feeling. Luo Nan instinctively felt danger, but before he could understand what danger was, the illogical information had already stuffed all of his reaction pathways. He was completely lost in this place. He was like a drunkard who had been completely drunk. He only wanted to close his eyes, cut off all information from entering his body, and fall into a deep sleep. At this time there was no use of willpower. There was only the instinct of his body. When he was tired he would sleep. When he was sleepy he would sleep. As for whether he would wake up or not after sleeping, how could he know such a complicated matter? He was numb. He was completely numb. Even if the heavens fell and the earth cracked. Wait a minute. It seemed that his surroundings really were shaking. Luo Nan was able to sense it. It wasn't because of how intense the shaking was. Instead, it was because under the stimulation of the inexhaustible and disorderly structure of colors and body sensations, the shaking was so neat and orderly. And it was so familiar. It was like a hook that probed into the depths of his soul, pulling out an entire string of information and memories that had been buried deep under the disorderly and chaotic ruins. This wasn't a particularly high-end or complicated matter. On the contrary, it was more of a neural reflex process that Luo Nan was already familiar with. It wasn't an instinct, but it was close to instinct. Luo Nan just triggered a bit of a bud, and then a whole set of reactions began to operate spontaneously. The chaotic and numb reaction pathways suddenly opened up a vein that was born due to the law. Then it extended all the way down. Sound, ears, vibration, muscles. From this moment on, Luo Nan clearly captured his own inherent organs and even his fuzzy self-perception. It was like a network node that was constantly vibrating, spreading its special frequency layer by layer. From this, Luo Nan sensed a dense neural network. He sensed his blood vessels and tendons. He sensed his bones, flesh, skin, and hair. He sensed his 5 viscera and 6 bowels. In the end, he sensed his entire body. It was like a gear set that had malfunctioned. It struggled amidst the chaos and disorder. There were obstructions. But with the introduction of special vibrations, a habitual rhythm that wasn't instinctive but was close to instinctive took the upper hand once more. Heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys. Ears, eyes, mouth, nose, and tongue. This was the art of 9 orifices and 6 roots that Luo Nan had been bitterly practicing for the past few months. Under Gym Master Xiu's supervision, Luo Nan had already treated this cultivation method as a natural part of his life. He didn't make any special plans, but walking, sitting, lying down, observing, smelling, and touching were all part of his cultivation. Up to this point, the art of body gear came from sensing his senses, the rotation of his internal organs, and the construction of his body and skeleton. It was meaningless to emphasize the exquisiteness of the art of 9 orifices and 6 roots under these circumstances. However, Luo Nan was able to further strengthen his memories from the gradual formation of this operating mechanism. At the same time, he dug out the foundation of the laws and rules of his life. His consciousness, which was still operating with difficulty, formed a short but clear and correct logic. With the body gear there should be a corresponding God gear. The body gear and God gear interacted with each other through coupling, forming the rules and order of his body and soul structure. God gear. God gear. The order of soul strength on the mental plane. The clattering sound of chains rang out. There seemed to be someone whispering into Luo Nan's ear amidst the unique rhythm. It was a familiar rhythm. It was a familiar abbreviation. Even if there were some distortions, Luo Nan was still able to analyze the information within. My heart is like a prison. My heart is like a furnace. My heart is like a mirror. My heart is like a country. The 16-word chant that originated from his grandfather took root in Luo Nan's body, soul, and neural network. Then it touched upon the mental plane and soul strength. Luo Nan's body and soul structure were slowly and firmly changed through 5 years of pure and extreme experimentation with drugs on his own body. It wasn't Luo Nan's innate talent, but it clearly showed the most essential rules and order of his existence. He was born as a human. Order was the cornerstone of his existence. It was the most precious thing. When Luo Nan had this realization in his mind, the heavily chained crow emerged from nothingness. It came from the depths of his heart, causing his body's prison format to manifest clearly. It acted internally. The coupling interference of the body gear and God gear returned to stability. A domain of rules was drawn for Luo Nan. It acted externally. The Wraith sign. Luo Nan's willpower and emotions exploded at the same time. Your F** king rebelling. Right now, Luonan was like a fisherman steering a boat on the surface of a hurricane. The body and soul system constructed by the laws was like a small dinghy. It carried him up and down within the boundless and chaotic storm of emotions and desires. He could be annihilated at any time. But even so, he still projected the heavily chained crow. He used the other end to firmly lock that malevolent and incorporeal wraith. He had to get to the bottom of this no matter what. What is this fellow doing in the end? The wraith sign appeared within the boundless elements of chaos. Unexpectedly, the wraith only curled up under the binding of the heavily chained crow. It was dispirited and listless. It didn't show any signs of resistance or backlash. But even so, there was still violent and berserk energy radiating from its body. It forcibly passed through the heavily chained crow that was designed as a one-way channel. It transmitted a terrifying high temperature that could burn the soul. Chapter 690. Luonan had already firmly controlled the wraith sign. The heavily chained crow's control over this demon was no different from any of the previous times. The wraith sign was indeed obedient and obedient. There really wasn't any rebellious situation. The wraith sign was still the wraith sign, but the wave after wave of high temperature was real. Now Luonan knew that this was a crazy storm of emotions and desires. Its intensity directly crushed the stone forest and magma lake of the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss region. It was larger, more restless, more extreme. So Luonan compared it to a hurricane wreaking havoc in the ocean. The obvious truth was that this power originated from the wraith sign. It originated from the chaotic and disorderly main body of the wraith sign. It was just that Luonan had never understood it. It wasn't something that could be understood. Using reason to touch emotions and desires was basically like a chicken talking to a duck. One would never be able to feel its power. It was just like how the cloud world and the local spacetime were separated by a thin and hazy membrane of spacetime. It was enough to make the billions of people on the planet turn a blind eye to it. The Abyss region and the plane of reality were muddled together in a certain sense, but they coexisted peacefully under the natural moat of the mental and the material. Now Luonan personally experienced the burning power of emotions and desires. He knew how to interpret it, and this membrane was pierced through. The power of another dimension was truly transmitted over. The transmission of this power was the unceasingly rising temperature of the heavily chained crow. It posed a more fundamental question to Luonan. The heavily chained crow clearly controlled the wraith sign. Why couldn't it control the power within the wraith sign's body? There seemed to be some sort of difference between the wraith sign and the power of the wraith sign. As for where the difference was, crackle. The high temperature and pressure transmission of the heavily chained crow formed an even more direct stimulation and threat to the structure of Luonan's body and soul. Luonan himself didn't know how to deal with it, but a certain element within his brain reacted a step ahead. The external neuron, this special creation, suddenly became lively. It continued to radiate bright and splendid electric flames. Right. Speaking of which, the external neuron was attached to the heavily chained crow. It was connected to Luonan's self-format. How could the wraith sign's powerful transmission of berserk energy not stimulate it? This was great. It really was a collision between the virtual brain system and the wraith sign system. Luonan suddenly recalled something. His mind temporarily moved away from the wraith sign and entered the virtual brain interface. As expected, the changes in the outside world were timely reflected in this magical visual interface, and the extent of the changes was beyond imagination. At the center of the virtual brain interface, inside the outline of the virtual brain that looked like a cluster of galaxies, billions of stars were gathered. However, they were flashing at different frequencies. Their positions were even shifting, showing unprecedented turbulence, as if they were experiencing an unexpected interstellar storm. The mysterious structure of the character, I, that was hidden inside, on the other hand, still maintained the same sense of order and hierarchy. Even if some of the stars and sectors were displaced, the structure would still be slightly adjusted as a whole, and the stability of the structure would always be maintained. It was very marvelous. After looking for a long time, Luonan vaguely jumped out from the structure of the mysterious I character. He let the structure of this activity revert to the comical dancing posture of his grandfather and father's photo. That's right. It really was like a god formed from millions and millions of stars was dancing amidst the violent interstellar storm. It also displayed a wonderful balance and coordination within the motion. Luonan's mind inexplicably became much clearer when he saw this scene. He was able to observe many more details. He noticed that there were 8 groups of rune structures surrounding the core image of the dancing god. They were the shoulders, the palms, the chest, the back, the top of the head, the soles of the feet, and so on. They were originally rather indistinct, but under the blowing of the interstellar storm, it was as if a layer of sand and dirt had been shaken off during the dancing posture. The fineness of the structure actually increased clearly, and more information flowed and transmitted wherever the eye could see. It might be said that Luonan understood something in an instant. It was just a subtle feeling. But it was precisely by following this feeling that his observation perspective completed a complete transformation without him realizing it. Luonan's field of view was pulled closer in his absent-minded state, probably because he was overly focused on the surrounding rune structure. Luonan's direction also changed. He was originally looking from the outside to the inside, but now he was looking from the inside to the outside. That's right. The current Luonan suddenly merged with the dancing god within the virtual brain galaxy. He turned his body within the intense interstellar storm, changing his angle of view, and cast his gaze towards the 8 floating and circulating rune structures around him. He experienced the details that he had previously overlooked. This sort of fusion wasn't particularly unfamiliar. Luonan's large coordinate system was constructed in a similar manner. But the corresponding dynamic changes, as well as the penetrating intuition that was closely related to the fineness of the surrounding 8 runes, gave him a wonderful confidence that he could understand many things. It was under the catalysis of this confidence that Luonan's gaze cast even further away. It cast itself towards the wraith shadow that was suddenly restless under the constraints of the virtual brain system. The wraith sign was still reflected within the virtual brain's interface right now, but it was no longer in the grayish hue of before. It was as if the wraith sign had come to life within this interface. Its 8 claws moved and it wandered within the dark void. Bewildering and nearly muddy light flowed up and down its entire body, so much so that it concealed its signature 6 extraordinary pupils. Luonan stared at the wraith sign. He stared at the dazzling radiance, but what inexplicably projected into his mind was a shadow. That's right, a shadow. If one only lowered their head to look, they would only be able to see the grayish silhouette of this nothingness. No matter how much one studied it, it would be the same. But if one were to shift their thoughts and shift their gaze, one would be able to see the standing tree that the shadow was clinging to. If one walked further up, one would be able to trace the source of the radiant radiance, and one would be able to see an incomparably enormous fireball. Luonan's thoughts came to a standstill for a moment before he was able to continue his understanding. It was a sun that erupted with high-temperature jets at all times. It silently rolled within the abyss of the distant spacetime. It surged with scorching heat, but it was negligible in comparison to its own power. It passed through some sort of opaque frame substance to finally form the wraith sign. A certain shadow that reflected a portion of the wraith sign structure and a deeper essence. The thing reflected by the wraith sign was very grand, but it was precisely because of this that it set off its lowly nature all the more. Forgive Luonan for describing it this way, for he simply did not know how this understanding came to be. It was as if there was a large amount of secret information that truly existed, yet it was hard to perceive. The information blended together with a special logic to form an answer in his mind. This was, without a doubt, a cognitive process that allowed him to directly pry into the secrets of heaven. Luonan was willing to maintain his muddled state, to sever this cognitive vein. Child of the Order of Justice once said, "Observation is order, and order is truth." This referred to the cognitive process itself. It was a transformation of the external world by the self-format. Luonan had once taught a class and changed these words. He used them to describe the prison theory on the mental plane. The scale was a bit larger. Contact was invasion. This description was certainly very refreshing when used on the strong. But the problem was that all effects were two-way. If Luonan did not know all of this, he would have remained in a state of ignorance towards the essence of the wraith sign and the source of its energy. He would not have experienced the storm of emotions and desires. He would have been an insulator. All he needed to do was fiddle with the low-end little shadow that was the wraith sign every day. But now, due to various lucky coincidences and the upgrade of some cognitive abilities that he did not understand at all, he was actually able to see through the phenomenon to see the essence. He was able to open up an entire meridian. At the same time, he also understood how to connect with the power of emotions and desires. As a result, all the obstacles in this path were completely shattered. The terrifying storm that came from the distant abyss of space-time descended with a rumble. It was as if a red-hot iron needle had been inserted into Luonan's brain at this moment. The needle was none other than the external neuron that could bear a sudden increase in pressure. Fortunately, This marvelous creation roamed between the mental plane and the material plane. It possessed its own set of operating mechanisms. When the pressure it bore exceeded a certain threshold, its existence on the material plane would instantly approach zero, avoiding direct damage to Luonan's brain tissue. But the pressure Luonan endured did not decrease at all. The virtual brain interface faithfully projected the terrifying power from the distant abyss of spacetime. The millions and millions of stars in the central region were instantly engulfed by the powerful stream of rays that was like a supernova explosion. There was a moment when Luonan practically believed that his fleshly body and soul were about to vaporize in an instant. A ruptured blankness appeared in his thoughts. It seemed that this blankness would extend forever. But Luonan inexplicably passed through this rupture zone a few seconds later. He woke up from his muddle-headed state, and he discovered to his surprise that his consciousness still had room to move about. He still had leeway to operate and control. Though the millions and millions of stars on the central planet endlessly swayed and flickered, shifting and deforming, the mystical I character that served as the main structure still maintained a relatively stable dynamic equilibrium. At the same time, the rattling and trembling sounds were like millions of wind chimes. They rapidly vibrated within the storm, yet they maintained a sweet-sounding timbre from beginning to end, revealing their extraordinarily stable structure. The vibrating sound actually came from the heavily chained crow. It pierced through the void where the energy storm wreaked havoc. It also pierced through the millions and millions of stars, becoming the skeleton, meridians, blood vessels, and nerves of the dancing god. The chain shuttled back and forth, interweaving densely. Though it trembled within the high-temperature and high-pressure storm, it did not deform. It was both a binding cage and an indestructible fortress. In addition, it guarded the surprisingly stable valve at the end of the passageway. Yes, if the terrifying storm from the distant abyss of spacetime was truly allowed to descend, then even if there were 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 Luonans, they would all be turned to dust in an instant. But without a doubt, the heavily chained crow belonged to the unidirectional channel design. It was constructed from the firm and pure laws, forming a true insulator. It was like a large sluice, firmly blocking the majority of the terrifying storm's impact. It also protected Luonan's core consciousness and fundamental format. Hold on. Since there was such a large sluice, why was there still such a powerful storm leaking out? Luonan could only search for the reason from his own body. He didn't have any flaws when it came to the construction of his rational format. But in another domain, on the level of emotions and desires that he had just experienced, he was completely defenseless. Yes, this was the primer. It was also the gap in the crack. What the heck was this? Luonan didn't know whether or not he should seriously criticize himself. But right now there was a more acute and direct problem. This terrifying storm that came from the distant abyss of spacetime was endlessly penetrating through the gap and crack in his passageway. It was expanding to an even wider area. If the storm directly reached the plane of reality, how many people in the world would be like him, protected by the insulating fortress valve? Luonan shuddered when he considered this situation. He struggled, wanting to do something, but soon he discovered a phenomenon. This terrifying storm didn't seem to directly reach the plane of reality. Instead, it spread out from an unexpected region. Chapter 691. Mr. Bai compared the interference value of the psychic wave network and repeatedly sized up Luonan's state. In the end, he let out a long breath and took back the wristband from Luonan's ear. He returned it to Xuanhuan and made an okay gesture. More or less. I can basically confirm that he has left the REM phase. Although his brain is still active, the order is increasing. He can wake up at any time. His face looks quite red? It should be the remnants of the dream stimulation. It might even be a wet dream. Mr. Bai casually joked. Zhang Yingying curled her lips, but Xuanhuan didn't respond at all. She just hung up the wristband. Mr. Bai actually wanted to communicate with Gym Master Xiao, but he didn't expect Xuanhuan to just hang up without saying any polite words. At this time, Xuanhuan lightly touched her ear. It looked like she was communicating on the psychic wave network. President Ouyang. Everyone in the room raised their eyebrows when they heard the name from her mouth. As for Xuanhuan, she nodded slightly toward Mr. Bai after listening to a few more words. She shared the communication with him. Mr. Bai walked away from Luonan's side and paced around the room. Ouyang, what's up? You're currently treating Luonan. Is the situation okay? Yes. It's quite optimistic. He already has clear and distinct consciousness activity. The order of the interference of soul strength has stabilized. What level is his consciousness activity at? The abyssal region? I'm not sure about that. How am I supposed to follow him? How about this, old Bai? If it's possible, wake Luonan up as soon as possible. He can accept some negative effects. Mr. Bai subconsciously turned his head and cast his gaze toward Luonan on the sofa. What's the meaning of this? Ouyang Chen's grave voice transmitted over. The branch sent a notice. I think headquarters will send it out soon. There are abnormal movements on the level of the polar domain. According to the reports of many extraordinaries in different regions of the world, their light senses are rapidly increasing. The subsequent effects will likely affect the abyssal region. Therefore, for the sake of safety, all activities in the abyssal region are prohibited for a period of time to avoid risks. Hold on. What's the meaning of this? Mr. Bai was a veteran ability user, but he was still confused when he heard this. We'll talk about the specifics later. Take care of Luonan for now. Wake him up no matter what. Prevent his consciousness from lingering in the abyssal region. We have a meeting at Shangding at 5 in the morning. Remember to attend. While Mr. Bai was still in the process of understanding, He Yuan and Ouyang Chen were already discussing specific matters. The scope of the notice needs to be expanded. In the past, it was enough to go down to the architect level, but now the situation is more complicated. Without a doubt, this referred to the fortress that Luonan had created. Ever since it floated in the Abyss region, there would be at least a few hundred people and at most 1,000 sightseeing groups every day. This was not just for show. Ouyang Chen sighed. Everything has its pros and cons. No matter what, let's inform them first. He Yuan confirmed a few more key points and issued the relevant notices before ending the call. In the blink of an eye, everyone was a little distracted. Judging from their expressions and actions, they should have received the notice from the branch. What the hell is this notice? The polar region is glowing, so activities in the abyss region are prohibited? Zhang Yingying was confused. In fact, for someone like her who had yet to reach B rank and was not a psychic, it was indeed a little difficult for her to understand the logic behind it. Zhang Yingying was fine. At the very least, she was experienced and knowledgeable. She knew the severity of the matter. She said it, but she would certainly pay attention to it in her heart. But for the other people of the Xia City branch, especially those who were unruly, rebellious and curious fellows, the results of this notice might not be ideal. Of course, if they could control the forward operating base, the fortress and block off the exit, things would be much easier. He Yuan pondered in her heart. Her gaze subconsciously turned to the sofa, but it just so happened that she collided with a pair of pupils that seemed to carry bloodshot cracks. Mr. Luo. Xia City was bound to be extremely busy tonight. From small events like the New Year's Eve to large events like the aberration infection, and now a brand new polar domain light event had appeared. The event itself was bound to be sensed or understood by the vast majority of people. But correspondingly, the pressure it formed was hard to find a channel to vent and transmit. Even Ouyang Chen felt mentally and physically exhausted after being immersed in it for a long time. The notice was sent quickly, but it was a very tiring matter to receive definite feedback from ability users who were used to being lazy and free. Especially after the appearance of the Abyss Region Fortress, the special circumstances that Xia City faced increased the difficulty. He only had the opportunity to catch his breath when it was almost 4:30. There was still half an hour before the briefing. He stole a bit of leisure time and walked in front of the French window. The view from the floor of the Xia City branch was quite bad, but tonight was quite a coincidence. When Ouyang Chen's gaze passed through the shadows of the surrounding buildings, he just so happened to see the crescent moon hanging in the eastern half of the sky. Tonight's moon seemed to be dyed with a layer of blood. It was as if the blood had seeped down from the polar domain. Not only did it smear the moon, it smeared everyone's eyes. How dazzling. An electric wheelchair came over from the corridor accompanied by a sigh. Old Yu sat on it with a blanket draped over his knees. There was still a bit of smoke on the blanket that had yet to dissipate. His originally loose eyelids drooped down as if he could fall asleep at any moment. Old Yu, did you take the opportunity to burn a turtle shell and take a look? Nope. I just smoked a cigarette and experienced the feeling of the past. Old Yu patted the blanket and swept away the non-existent ash. He chuckled, what a pity. It doesn't feel right no matter how I try it. It's not a problem with the smoke. The color of the light and the feeling are quite different from the past. The two of them had already exchanged relevant information. Ouyang Chen didn't plan on tormenting himself again. He laughed and said, Old Yu, it's nearly impossible to find someone like you who has personally experienced the light of the polar domain twice. Don't say that. Gong Chi made quite a bit of a joke back in the day. Of course, I wasn't much better than him. Now that his soul has left his body and he's gone missing. But who knows where he's pondering this matter in some corner. You're pondering it too. I admit to these words. I didn't understand it back in the day. When you extraordinaries came out, I thought I could put it in your category. But now that this has happened, I can't compare. I can't compare at all. Old Yu gazed at the crescent moon and sighed with sorrow. He asked in the end, what does the martial monarch think? I just contacted her. She's driving for a drive and she's going to see an old friend on the way. She won't be participating in the briefing. Old Yu didn't find it strange. He just sighed again. She's so calm and collected. I can't even be envious of her. What about Deep Blue? Did the Apocalypse Laboratory say anything? Over there. In the end, the moonlight of Xia City couldn't shine on the other side of the ocean. While Ouyang Chen and Old Yu were talking about Deep Blue in the Apocalypse Laboratory, an emergency video conference was being held in the Deep Blue world. The topic of discussion was none other than the light of the polar domain. However, compared to Ouyang Chen and Old Yu, the information they received was more comprehensive and more mysterious. Xiong Gumao confirmed at Series Base that he felt the polar domain's luminosity rapidly increase. I've already consulted Europa's preliminary base. Commander Joseph confirmed that he felt the light of the polar domain phenomenon. 800 million kilometers. Wang Yu rubbed her cheeks and tried to change her expression. Oh, there's also the Deep Blue world. Thank you to the 4 extraordinaires who attended the conference at the last minute. The information provided by everyone has allowed us to confirm that the so-called light of the polar domain really does have the property of being unfathomable. The 4 extraordinaires who were located in different regions of the Deep Blue world and engaged in exploratory activities projected their images into the conference center. They were either smiling or indifferent, but all of them maintained a strong curiosity towards the series of information. Wang Yu maintained a proper posture and tone. The biggest news in the world this year has been released. However, forgive me for being a commoner. I really have no way of personally experiencing what the light of the polar domain phenomenon is like. I can only seek help from literature. There's only one relevant document that records a similar situation that occurred more than 40 years ago at the beginning of the era of distortion. I've already sent the relevant information to everyone. Everyone can compare it and give your opinion. The 4 extraordinaires who attended the conference were all rather interested in this information. They immediately flipped through it. However, this action didn't last for more than 2 seconds. They practically froze at the same time. Wang Yu's senses were very sharp. He noticed this detail. What's wrong? Someone answered him, it's dark over at the polar domain. The luminosity has weakened? No, it seems like something is covering it. What the hell? Even the person who spoke could not stand this absurd feeling. He wished he could deny it on the spot. Wang Yu, on the other hand, was more rational. His gaze swept across the extraordinaires in succession. Some paid attention to him, some ignored him, but the answers he obtained were more or less the same. In the end, Wang Yu turned to the region of Deep Blue's investors and controllers and locked onto his target. His gaze came into contact with a very young and trendy person. His hair seemed to be dyed a color similar to steel blue, and his skin was so white that it glowed. This combined to form a very strange overall hue, giving his relatively ordinary facial contours a peculiar charm. Professor Li Wei, what's your opinion? I won't express my opinion on matters that I can't accurately understand. Guessing makes one superficial, and describing reveals one's incompetence. Rather than exposing one's shortcomings, it's better to observe. His harsh words attracted the unfriendly gazes of several extraordinaires, but surprisingly no one flipped the table in anger. As the convener and host of the conference, Wang Yu maintained a good attitude. He calmly smiled and said, people always have to choose the right from the wrong. Forgive me for saying a few layman, but light always has a source. Where is the source of the light of the polar domain phenomenon? Can you locate it? The cover, just now, was the light source blocked? Chapter 692. The briefing conference convened at the Shangding building was about to begin. Most of the architect-level powerhouses in Xia City were present at the conference. The conference had yet to officially begin, but the latest situation in the polar domain had already changed. It was unknown how many people's heads were stuffed with the absurd reality of darkness and light. What had originally been a private conversation between Ouyang Chen and Old Yu had already turned into a large discussion with many people participating. The chatter was endless and everyone had their own opinions. The discussion only came to an end when Yuan and her group rushed back from Aurora Cloud City. Gao Ming was the first to cry out when he saw Yuan and the others push open the door and enter. "Hey, where's Boss Luo?" Gao Ming had been happily cooperating with Luo Nan for many days now. In his mind, Luo Nan was a super genius that appeared once in 100 years. Therefore, he wanted to know Luo Nan's opinion on this matter. But Yuan and Bamboo Pole were the only ones who came. The most important thing was that Luo Nan was nowhere to be seen. Mr. Bai was also nowhere to be seen. Mr. Luo's grandfather is critically ill. The hospital has already issued a notice of critical illness. He has already rushed over. Mr. Bai is an expert in soul science and related pathology, so he has gone to help as well. Gao Ming went, "Oh my," but he was unable to say anything else. Yuan looked around and discovered that people were missing. Her Majesty Empress Wu isn't here? Naturally, Ouyang Chen was the one to explain this. Gao Ming was a straightforward person. He clapped his hands and said, "This is great. The two people who are most likely to have fantastic ideas aren't here. Let's just stare at the information and make blind guesses." The people present were all used to this. They didn't mind hearing this. They just roared with laughter. There were currently a total of 10 people in the conference room, and there were a total of 15 people who were above the architect rank in Xia City. Aside from Her Majesty Empress Wu, Luo Nan, and Mr. Bai, there were also the horned demons and crag burst who were currently wandering in the wilderness. And so, everyone was present. But when Ouyang Chen saw the ratio of the fleshly side to the mental side in the conference room, he could only agree with Gao Ming's explanation. He spoke in a chatty tone. "I'll explain the matter first. Then everyone can discuss it." Anhai Sanatorium was located in the outskirts of Xia City. It was early in the morning, but there were parts of the emergency center upstairs that were brightly lit. Emergency treatment was being carried out for an elderly patient who was at high risk. At this hour, the recuperation center was spacious and empty. There was almost no one around and most of the lights were off. There were only a few cars parked in the parking area below the emergency medical center. They belonged to the doctors and staff who were on duty who participated in the emergency treatment. In the meantime, there was a civilian version of the SUV, which also turned off its engine and quietly parked at the edge of the parking area. However, there was another person in the car. He was sitting in the driver's seat, holding a Coke cup in his left hand and a bucket of fried chicken in his right. He was munching away happily. In the meantime, an aircraft flew through the night sky and landed directly on the lawn next to the emergency center. A group of people hurriedly got off and ran into the building. The people in the car didn't even raise their heads, but they knew that it was Luo Yuandao's daughter's family. This high-speed aircraft was transferred through the branch's resources. However, this aircraft came directly from the Nader district, so Luo Nan wasn't on it. He needed to hurry over from the Pingjiang district on the other side of Xia City. Of course, Luo Nan's telepathic thoughts had arrived a long time ago. It was just that his thoughts were projected toward the emergency room. He didn't have the time to care about the cats and dogs in the corner. I, the one with the surname Jean, have fallen to the level of a cat and dog. Speaking of which, do you know that there's someone playing hide and seek in the emergency room? The driver with the surname Jean cracked a smile, revealing his sharp teeth and crushed bones and flesh. The rumbling of an engine came closer at this time. A flying car flew through the spacious hospital area at a speed of over 300 kilometers per hour. It finally braked and drifted, spinning as it stopped below the emergency center. The car hadn't even come to a complete stop when Luo Nan pushed open the car door and jumped out. He rushed onto the porch in 2 steps. By the time Mr. Bai got out of the car, Luo Nan had fallen nearly 20 meters behind. He saw that he was about to crash into the building, but his wristband vibrated at this time. Luo Nan instinctively assumed that it was his aunt at this time. He immediately connected. "I'm already here," Shuelei's urgent and resonant voice poured into his ears. "Nanster, the gym master's old injuries have relapsed. He's being sent to the hospital right now. I've consulted with the branch. They recommended sending him to Anhai Sanatorium. They say that it's more convenient to treat him there. I remember that your grandfather is over there. Do you know him better?" Luo Nan stopped in his tracks in shock. "Gym master?" Luo Nan had just gone through a few rounds of baptism. His brain was a bit lacking for a time. He was stupefied on the spot, unable to come back to his senses for a long time. The windows of the civilian SUV in the parking area were tightly shut, and they were separated by 100 meters. But driver Jin's 5 senses and 6 senses were out of this world. He didn't miss a single bit of the corresponding unforeseen event. He began to chuckle and his mouth chewed with even more gusto. Yep, he didn't have any evil intentions. He was just taking joy in Luonan's misfortune. In the end, Luonan still went inside. Soon, the emergency center's front building recovered its tranquility. Driver Jean finished off the chicken leg and cola in his hand. He let out a yawn and fell back. The car's AI considerately lowered the back of the chair for him, and he prepared to take a good nap. In the meantime, another rescue shuttle came over to transfer the patient. It was probably Gym Master Xiao. Driver Jean knew this person. He was a genius for being able to live this long due to the great collapse of the genetic plane. At the very least, Driver Jean could empathize with Gym Master Xiao. Driver Jean raised his eyelids, but he didn't completely open them in the end. He just spat out a stream of hot air from his nostrils. It seemed like he was sneering and sighing. Then the hospital area recovered its tranquility. But not long after, the sound of knocking on the car window rang out. A tall woman stood next to the passenger window. She wore the hospital's trademark white coat. The length was just right, but it appeared a bit loose. That fast. Driver Jean got up and opened the car door to let the woman get in. The smell of disinfectant assaulted their nostrils. It was hard to describe with words the smell of roast chicken that filled the car. "What are you wearing that for?" Driver Jean grumbled and opened the car window. The woman in the passenger seat snapped her fingers. Before the sound faded away, hundreds of millions of related odor molecules were gathered by some mysterious force and expelled from the car. Chauffeur Jean said lazily, "Your Majesty is awesome." Empress Wu didn't even bother to look at him. She just nodded forward, indicating for him to drive. Old Jean immediately started the car. The civilian SUV drew a short arc and drove toward the area where the light and shadows of the street lamps intersected. It quickly passed through the main gate and left the sanatorium behind. On the way, Driver Jean couldn't help but feel a bit curious. That old man Luo, after you gave him a breath of immortal qi, he should be able to hold on for another year and a half, right? Not necessarily. If he waves the cloak 2 more times like this, even if a god really descends, he won't be able to be saved. Wu Jiong took off his white coat unhurriedly, hooked a corner of it and let it out the window. The high-speed airflow blew the white coat up. If one didn't care about the details, it really did look like a cloak fluttering in the wind. "Hey, do you have any sense of civility? I can't care anymore." As he spoke, the white coat was blown away from his fingers and flew into the distance, quickly disappearing into the darkness. "Although it's already tattered and too heavy, I still hope that someone can catch it and buy us some time." "You're counting on his grandson?" "He, unreliable. If he jumps like this now, what will happen in the future? If it's that kid, if he's not as unlucky as you, I hope he jumps better and better. Even if he can't be a cloak, he can still be a shield. However, fate is ultimately uncontrollable. It's like a beam of light that escapes. Who knows if it will be annihilated and assimilated in the vast cosmos? Or will it safely arrive tens of thousands of light years away and be captured by someone?" Driver Jean curled his lips. "Let's use a woman's intuition to make a judgment." This is terrible. This is really terrible." Sheng Wu closed his eyes, and his brainwaves flowed in an orderly manner. His mechanical arm tapped on the virtual keyboard, and his personal diary and work diary were output at the same time. The content and direction of the 2 paragraphs were different, but they were smooth and natural. There were no signs of simultaneous operation. This was the basic operation of the School of Creation, and it was also the best way to test one's basic abilities. Sheng Wu keenly sensed that, compared to the output of his brainwaves, every action of the mechanical arm would have a delay of about 7/1000ths of a breath. 1 breath was the basic moment, which was 10e plus 44 times the minimum measurable time interval. Sheng Wu would never be able to reach the perceptual precision of the basic moment in his entire life, but for any advanced life form, refining the perceptual precision was a lifelong pursuit. Using breath, as the scale was too depraved. Even if it was reduced by 3 orders of magnitude, it would still be unforgivable on the battlefield. General Lone once said. Wait a minute, he was no longer on the battlefield, and he was no longer this single knight who charged at the outlands, but a retired officer who was sent to the reserves. He was the manager of the Stargate Infrastructure Management Office of U-1337, who had to spend all his time before retirement in this galaxy that even the outlands were too lazy to visit. A communication came in. This is Sheng Wu. Oldie. Okay, bring him here. Soon, his deputy xianxia came to his office with the rookie of the management office, Xanti. Xanti was a standard rookie dumbass. This was not a bad comment. Under General Lone's command, he was associated with the element of serious and naive. He was a good piece of steel that could be beaten. The only thing that Xingwu hated was the little guy's mental attribute that had gone awry. Director Xing. Call me sir. Yes sir. Reserve Corporal Zandi reporting to you. In the outer region of the U-1337 galaxy, a Class 7 wave anomaly has appeared. Based on the Praeger effect, I have calculated the approximate relative position and sector. The young man had already sent the relevant information. Xingwu sized it up and murmured, 42 squares away, that's 42 days ago. Is there any follow-up? Sir, there is no follow-up. Also, sir, it should be 21 squares and 21 days. We have changed the standard units of the heavens to connect with the various systems of the divine kingdom. There was a moment of silence in the office, and then Xingwu said pleasantly, you are right, old habits have not been changed. Now, Corporal, you can follow the procedures and apply for a scout ball, the kind that can fly in hyperspace. Calculating at the highest speed, in about 5 Pantheon years later, before your 20th birthday, you will receive the most detailed results. Maybe by then you can receive a reward from the military before your contract ends. It's even better if it ends. You can change your career in time and become an explorer. According to the information, you can find a high-level life-gathering area and immediately become a billionaire. Oh no, it should be a new pattern for the God of Dawn's cloak. Now go do it, child, good luck. The dumbass left in a daze. Xingwu turned his eyes to his deputy. Xianxia raised his hand to say, it has nothing to do with me, and then ran out of the door. The standard units of the heavens, multiplied by 2 is the standard unit. It seems that the gods in the heavens are really cheap. Xingwu's voice was isolated in the office, but as his deputy, Xianxia could guess some of the content. But it had nothing to do with him. After leaving the door, Xianxia directly pulled a certain line. The relevant data is in hand. Traveling at high speed through hyperspace to the relevant sector, without a senior lord to oversee, driving the configuration will require a large team of at least 400 people. Recruiting now, we can set off in 4 standard weeks. At most 100 weeks later, we will have a definite result. Chapter 693. Cat Eyes had a dream. He dreamed that she was crawling on a large net made of long metal chains. The net was endless and extended into the depths of the void, with no end in sight. She didn't know where she was crawling, but she knew that there was a blazing sun in the center of the net, constantly radiating astonishing light and heat. The terrifying heat was transmitted through the long metal chain, burning her hands and feet. But it was not enough. It burned all the way through her skin, flesh, and bones, mixing the half-melted metal droplets with her body fluids, turning her into a part of this endless net. She struggled in fear, but she could not resist the momentum of the fusion. But at the same time, a vigorous sense of power rushed in wave after wave, pushing her consciousness to expand and expand, giving her an unprecedented sense of fulfillment and control. Afterwards, Cat Eyes vaguely remembered who the energy that was squeezing in had come from. This kind of forced giving and the complete loss of resistance made her inevitably have some subtle associations. It was like a gunpowder pinch. After a few sparks, the compressed gunpowder exploded with a bang. This was different from the external pressure. This was an impulse that originated from Cat Eyes herself. The explosion was not a destructive shockwave, but a poisonous fire that rapidly set a prairie ablaze. It burned through every corner of her body, both inside and out. Cat Eyes let out a hiss as she suddenly woke up with a start. Only then did she discover that her entire body had been soaked in bodily fluids. The poisonous flames that had scorched her body had turned into a warm and sticky sensation that was hard to distinguish. It was truly terrible. She looked at her watch. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, only 2 hours before she fell asleep. Cat Eyes sighed and extended her hand to scratch her scalp. Her long hair, which was already drenched in sweat, was scratched even more messily. There was no way she could sleep again tonight. She might as well take a shower to freshen herself up. Cat Eyes activated the hexier while she was bathing. She prepared to send a few messages to relieve her boredom. However, as soon as he opened it, the whooshing sound of information notifications filled the air like locust-like arrows, making him feel as if thousands of arrows were piercing through his heart. The intelligent system of the psychic wave network thoughtfully picked out the common keywords in most of the information for her and categorized them accordingly. There's a bug in the fortress. Boss Luo, save me. Boss Luo, come out. Take off Boss Luo's bracelet to ensure your safety. Tear off Gao Tianshir's sticker to ensure your life is valuable. Boss Luo is going missing again. Where are the people from the project team? The first to be trapped is the project team. Winky face. Due to the fortress project in the Abyss region, the late spring night of Xia City experienced the fiery heat of summer ahead of time. Several hundred people were in a chaotic mess, alarming Gao Meng, Mr. White and other veteran B-rank powerhouses. They tossed and turned, but the most important figures had disappeared without a trace in the darkness of the night. The first time this happened it was horrifying. The second time it was painful. The third time it was sullen. The fourth time, the fifth time, the sixth time, and even the countless times, it was completely numb. Cat Eyes entered the friend group established by Luo Nan. It clearly displayed that the group owner was not in the service area. However, most of the other group members were still awake. Bamboo Pole, who was currently trapped in the fortress, barely managed to send a voice transmission. His voice was full of resentment. Boss Luo got away again. What are you security guards doing? Hee, do I have to emphasize it again? Right now we live on as sparring partners. Qin Yikuan, who had already been relieved of his role as a bodyguard, was like a floating ghost. Shuelei, who always had a stable schedule, was woken up. He provided outdated information. In the afternoon he went to the sanatorium to see Grandpa Luo and the gym master. He even practiced Sanzhou with me. You didn't break his legs? Shuelei felt wronged. Right now he's most proficient in speed and control. The photoelectric leg and the illusory magnetic field are simply amazing. What a crappy name. It's not like I came up with it, brother Papercut. Seeing that the topic was about to stray to the other side of the Pacific Ocean, the always calm Bamboo Pole was truly enraged. I'm about to be squeezed dry. Is this the time to discuss dogs' hit names? What happened next? Where did he go next? I asked Brother Red Fox. Nanster trained with Brother Red Fox. Yes, he learned city tracking and anti-tracking techniques with me. We walked to the orphanage in the Forest Wall district on foot. We practiced midway, then I went back. Dean Wan? Oh, he's not in the group. Where's Dean Wan's eldest disciple? Little Xie? There's no need to ask. Last night, Luo Nan spent the night at Gear. He's been like this every day. Rui Wen even went to deliver food. Cat Eyes found an opportunity to cut into the conversation and provided the most valuable information. However, this was tantamount to selling Luo Nan out. Zhang Yingying sent a raging emoji. Then why can't I find him every time? This was because he would jump several thousand kilometers away. He was quite willful. Zhang Yingying was unable to obtain a satisfactory answer from Cat Eyes. She turned around and shouted at Red Fox, "To think that you call yourself Fox. He is a shut-in who never steps out of his house. Don't you have any idea why he is learning from you?" Red Fox replied with a disdainful emoji. It's more important to figure out Boss Luo's whereabouts. Papercut acted as a peacemaker, doing his best to bring the topic back to the topic. But as he spoke and spoke, he strayed a bit off topic. Speaking of which, I find it strange. No matter what, Boss Luo has nothing to do with shut-ins recently, right? What's going on with him? Has his body been taken over by someone? Cat Eyes sneered and replied, "Puberty has arrived. Hormones are being secreted in excess. He's already 17, big sis. Endocrine disorder." Fine. It doesn't matter what stage Boss Luo has reached in puberty. Where in the world is he right now? There are over 100 people waiting for him to save. The matter helplessly returned to its original point. In the early morning hours of April 22, 2097, the tracking operation against the Fortress Project Team's chief consultant, Luo Nan, ultimately came to nothing. Everyone was unable to find Luo Nan in the end. The project team and a few experts in Xia City, who already had some understanding of configurations, worked together and finally solved the problem. There was no need to mention the misery involved. Cat Eyes watched the development of the situation with cold eyes. Her heart was unmoved. After all, there had been far too many people in the past few months. There had been far too many people who had been left in dire straits due to Luo Nan's willfulness. Especially those who urgently wished to obtain power from Luo Nan's body, from the sun behind Luo Nan. Yes, perhaps Luo Nan himself was included? Cat Eyes finally obtained the pleasure of rebalancing herself when she thought of this. D City. It was 4 hours earlier than Xia City. It was already early morning. D City was in the southern hemisphere. It was currently autumn and winter, so the seaside was cold and gloomy. There was a rocky beach near the seaside that was rarely visited by tourists. Yinlu stood on this rare piece of flat ground. She faced the sea and felt the strong sea breeze blowing against her face. She felt as though she was standing in front of a blast furnace that was burning steel. The air current that assaulted her face could carry high-temperature flames at any time. Common sense and reality. Simple sensations and complex high-level senses entangled with each other. They slowly mutated her perception, allowing her to gradually get used to this special environment until she became accustomed to it. She closed her eyes and the burning Blood Soul Temple appeared before her eyes. The solidified configuration of the Abyss region seemed to be very close to her. It could burn off her eyebrows and destroy her face at any time. Every stream of lava that flowed on it contained a high-temperature energy that was 10 times higher than before. The Blood Soul Temple of the Abyss region originally didn't have any substantial temperature to speak of. What it gathered was just the extremely paranoid emotions and thoughts of the believers. Chapter 694. The one struggling in the water was Madame Halder. At this moment, the Blood Flame Order's Lord Ablatum was no longer as calm as usual. She looked more like she was drowning. Her hands and feet twitched and she curled up and rolled. The bubbles that came out of her mouth and nose indicated that a large amount of seawater had entered her lungs. It was as if her life could be taken at any time. The surrounding seawater was boiling. Affected by the high temperature of Lady Halder's body, the seawater was constantly changing its form, going back and forth between liquid and gas. But at the same time, there was a coldness that never changed. It was like a prison, like a torture device. It constantly surrounded Mrs. Halder, lashing and torturing her, challenging her physical and psychological limits. In the depths of the ocean, Ianla seemed to be able to see the silhouette of a youth directing and controlling the current situation, changing it in the direction that he wished. Ianla didn't dare to take another look, nor did she dare to interfere. She could only stand stiffly by the shore. About 5 minutes later, the rising tide pushed the rising and falling bubbles, and also pushed a naked body to the shore. Purely from a visual point of view, this woman's body was mature, fit, and well-rounded. However, the most eye-catching thing was not her figure, but the heat radiating from her body, which seemed to be able to burn and distort the air. However, her skin was strangely pale, without the slightest hint of blood. "Madam." Ianla stepped on the seawater and ran forward. She draped a long scarf over the exhausted Mrs. Halder to cover her. Mrs. Halder was still in a daze. She lifted her eyelids and saw that it was Ianla, but she didn't say anything. She curled up under the fireproof towel, her body still twitching. After another minute, her body gradually calmed down and she recovered a bit of her strength. The first thing she said was, "Mr. Luo, what do you think?" On the shoreline, part of the seawater that was pushed up by Lady Halder was still close to the boiling point. The corresponding water, light and steam, under the influence of an invisible force, spiraled up and down. In the time of 2 or 3 breaths, a blurry human figure was formed. The sea breeze blew, and the water vapor that formed the human figure fluctuated a few times. When it appeared again, it was already a relatively clear face of a young man. It was Luo Nan. He stood behind Lady Halder's curled body and looked down. He did not immediately respond. Although he didn't say it out loud, he wasn't completely unperturbed. Luo Nan had to admit, the woman in front of him was truly ruthless. She really did have the courage to break through the norm. Right now Madame Halder was very weak. She lay paralyzed on the rough rocky beach, practically motionless. Beneath the fireproof towel, cold sweat seeped out of her body before being dried by the high temperature. It was a unique creation that belonged only to her. Because of this, she remained indifferent when Luo Nan continued to throw pressure and negative emotions at her. Even when the sun wheel behind the Wraith sign passed through the polar domain and Luo Nan to smash a terrifying extreme power into the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District, turning it into a forbidden zone of death. In essence, Madame Halder was deprived of control over the system of the Blood Soul Temple. She remained calm and composed. All of this, from Madame Halder's perspective, was a furnace fire. They were all accelerants. Only she herself was a valuable material. This woman was very crazy and she was even more interesting. There was just one thing that Luo Nan didn't understand. The grinded blade is a level higher than the user. This kind of technique. You're saying that this originated from the heart-searing blade issued by Her Majesty Empress Wu? It doesn't look like it no matter how I look at it. I'm afraid there aren't many people in this world who are equally proficient in the dripping sword, Mr. Luo. That's true. Luo Nan openly admitted. In any case, this core is quite high level. I'll study it a bit more later. Luonan withdrew his hand. Today's homework was more or less over. Madame Halder sat up with her arms propped up. She focused on regulating her energy, and only now did Yinli have the chance to speak. Aside from serving Madame Halder, she had another mission. Mr. Luo, we've already discovered the information you provided. We've locked onto the most likely areas. Please take a look. The work area displayed a satellite image of another major maritime metropolis in the East Asian region, Banyan City. 3 special areas had already been marked out. Right now, all of them appeared dark red, completely different from the other areas. Although the Order's influence in Banyan City isn't that great, Snake Tongue has always been independent. She doesn't have many old friends. It will be very difficult for her to transfer her soul to a second body. As long as we lock onto the location, we will be halfway to success. Today, I will rush to Banyan City to ensure that nothing goes wrong. Oh, that's fine. Madame Halder opened her eyes at this time. Snake Tongue is an experienced architect of the mental side. She is also world famous for her curse techniques. All sorts of traps and ambushes can't be underestimated. We need to be prepared to lose personnel. The transfer plan after we succeed needs to be even more secure. After all, we aren't the only ones searching right now. Yes. Luonan didn't mind too much. He wanted the Blood Flame Order to act. He just thought of it as looking for a logistics company. I'll be watching when the time comes. Madame Halder's energy had recovered a bit. She was already able to make small talk. Mr. Luo's ability to mentally travel 10,000 miles is truly enviable. She gave her hand to Yinli as she spoke. Yinli slowly stood up with Yinli's help. At the same time, she adjusted the position of the fireproof towel, allowing the exposed skin to rotate. There's only one international flight from T-City to Banyan City. It leaves this morning. You can move at night or early tomorrow morning. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.